Good afternoon. I'm very happy we have such a good turnout for our panel. I'm Alina Rodachinskaya. I represent Open Data NGO or community, and our main purpose is to connect data providers and data users. I'm very happy with the lineup of panelists today, as it offers a range starting from international organizations and all the way to people on the ground. So we have some panelists and people in the floor who will make their presentations as well. So we have Julia Shapkina, head of Directorate of Sectoral Informatization from the Ministry of Informatization. We also have Sergei Rudnev, First Deputy Director of National Center of Electronic Services. They're developing OAIS system. It's a portal. We also have Alexei Ivankin from Ukraine, a co-founder of Open Data Bot. His team worked on the second version of the Open Data Bot. We also have Olga Shcherbina, head of IFC office in Belarus, Pavel Kuznetsov, founder and leader of Pakadan group of companies, a real estate center, property center, and Nadezhda Tsarenik, an architect, urban architect. So we are going to discuss how open data can be beneficial for business, government, and citizenry. Also, we have Vyacheslav Skolarevich from Kartoteka, Belarus. We have representative National Statistics Committee, Vyacheslav Provolotsky, head of section on information system development with Belstat, Svetlana Korinevich, chief officer on statistical data distribution or dissemination, Nikolai Kolas, representing Novacom company, a portal designer. They were awarded a tender to develop that website, so now they're working on it. Now, did I miss anybody? I don't think so. So before we start, let me get to know you a little better. So who do we have in this room? Are there any representative of government agencies? Not too many. Who represents business? Legal community? Journalists? Anybody else that I missed? Some researchers, activists? Civil society. Yeah, civil society. Great. We have some diversity here, both in the panel and amongst the participants. So, this is the second time we're arranging an open data panel. Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the internet as we know it, believes that open data is the next step to internet development. Therefore, he developed the Open Data Institute in Great Britain, and he contributes heavily to this pursuit. So, Open Data Society is turning 10 years old, so some conclusions and findings are being made as to the state of play. Last week, I visited the Prime International Conference in Buenos Aires. There was some disillusionment with the development of this sector. One of the key indices, open data parameters, reports a considerable regression in In terms of number of publications, and two countries that have been ahead of the pack, Great Britain and the United States, have lost um, 1 and 7 points in their ratings accordingly. So open data is going through a crisis, but it's a constructive crisis. Also, this year, principles of the open data set have been revised. They speak more and more on open by demand publications, and this is the thought that is near and dear to me. This is the key factor for the open data to work, so that there's no frustration among data providers and data users. So data users would understand that their opinion, their inputs are appreciated. This is where my intro comes to an end. And obviously, I give the microphone to Yulia Shapkina to tell us how open data develops in Belarus. We are preparing an open data portal. There are some challenges on the way, so I asked Yulia to bring you up to speed on the state of play. Good afternoon. Indeed, the open data portal is under active development, designed by Novacom. The portal is will be ready to testing very soon, and we're designing it against the experiences of Russia, Kazakhstan, Korea, England. The data that we're planning to publish have been based on the studies, and the Open Data Society helped us a lot in terms of open data demand. We identify data sets that are most called for by the business, journalists, academia. And then we conducted a study into what data can be provided by the stakeholders based on these requests. So in November, we're planning to start working with the government to compile the first data set to be published on the future open data portal to be launched in early next year. So the demands are very similar, including financing, income, transportation, health, education, environment. So we actively cooperate with the State Property Committee, Ministry of Health, and the other stakeholders. Our portal will be different in that it will be hosted on the government informatization network. For the portal to be operationalized, we designed a piece of legislation, and the first reading and way of approval has been successfully performed. We're going to have to address this issue with the National Statistics Committee, concerning some limitations, data limitations. Open data and national data, there are some restrictions that apply, and we're going to have to fix it with the National Statistics Committee. Well, that's all I have for the starters. Can you name, you mentioned the ministries you are cooperating with. what data sets can we expect, first of all, and will they be specified in the legislation? No, they are not going to be specified. We'll left it at the discretion of the stakeholders. I mean, they are going to publish data driven by demand. We're going to try to make it an annual practice, building some sort of registry of data. Initially, we want to follow this pattern. So every year we're going to monitor the demand side. So we're going to utilize a feedback mechanism. Based on the feedback, we're going to see which authorities will be able to provide this data. There are questions from the floor at this moment. I mean, you can ask your questions to the panelists as we go. I'm Dmitry Ivanovich. My question is, there is a Federal Statistics Committee portal in Russia. I don't know if you heard about it, which has already completed what you are contemplating. I mean, they offer sector by sector breakdowns. I think there are about 5,000 data sets. I mean, it's in place and working. As for your portal, we don't know what it will turn out to be. Have you engaged expertise? I mean, what's the benefit for the users? Users see data in a different light. And when you develop something for your own benefit, users will not find it of value, which is what happened with the analytical system of Bellstat. I mean, they designed it for their own needs, disregarding the needs of the people.
So we have studied the experience of international portals of open data of other countries that are functioning quite well, and the main formats of the data that are published there we have also studied. So we implemented all that. So if it will be not enough for the users at the first stage, so we're going to develop. So I hope that we will have some feedback. So we will implement the comments and requirements of the users. But Bellstat has its own analytical system. MinFin, Ministry of Finances, has its own interactive database of budget. So each authority has a department for statistics, and they publish regularly this data. So won't it be duplicated, you know? So will you have something extended, something different? In the portal we have easily so data which can be used by the services, by applications for visualization. The data published by the Ministry of Financing, they can be read by humans, but they need adaptation in order to be published in the open data portal. So in the way it's published in their system, they are not usable, they are not applicable for other users. Thank you. Yulia, you mentioned that you will work with the ministries and suppliers of the data. But what happens if the Ministry of Communication makes the first research and the users writing that we need data set A, no obstacles, administrative or legal obstacles for revealing this data. So the Ministry of Communication reports about that to the other ministries, to the community, and then they said, okay, that's very good, but and nothing happens. So what was done? What are the mechanisms to implement that? We don't want to push the authorities too much. We made some meetings, we seen some positive response, But of course, we inform them that there will be some additional workload, so there should be some experts in the authorities, there should be some infrastructure with the necessary data structure. It will be not easy. We want to make first the pilot projects in the interactive format and try to make it by ways of negotiations, trying to support them, explain them, and so this is our first benchmark is to make just 30 data sets. It's not much, and so will you? So who will be? So who will have access to this first pilot project that you've been mentioning? Yeah, it's not even a pilot. It's just the first project, and it will be on permanent basis. Hope that all the questions were answered. So I now give the floor to Sergei Rudnev. So the company is developing ICE system, which collects all the structures in it. It's very important how all these components will interact. So there is the portal that's been developed, software being upgraded. So how is it technically possible? How will it be implemented from the technical point of view? Please tell us. Good afternoon. I have only 10 minutes to tell about our project. So this is a big presentation on e-governance development in the Republic of Belarus, but I've just taken, so this is the title of this presentation, but I've taken some slides showing what is integrated automated information system. So architecture of e-governance, it's like personal profile, then electronic services, and one window system, then the institution of informational intermediaries like Bell Telecom, post offices, etc. Then documents exchange system. Next level, like those who work with the tax information, taxation information systems and portals. They know how it works with the special access keys. And so the next next level is the system of authorization of the users, which is a state information resources system. Then we have the law, which regulates all that law about information, informatization, and data protection, and then the decree of the president on some issues of informatization, and the law of the Republic of Belarus about the basis of administrative regulation. So all that is functioning in a non-protected form. So what are the compatibility principle? So when we are working, so the components are doing like 1,953 connections with only 63 authorities involved, and it's without this single bars. But if we use the single bars with operability principle, then we have only 63 channels of interconnection, not this almost 2,000 ones. But it's including protection, web services, and the whole technological process of data exchange. So this target function, target is actually to provide maximum interoperability of the state authorities in the country. And what will be the benefits, the achievements? So first of all, we will counteract corruption, because it will be, we will achieve transparency of all the data flows. We will minimize the distortions of the information, etc., etc. And the world trends show that in this way, with this kind of interaction, with the feedback from users, we get purification of the data. Currently, in the world, if 75% of purity in information resource is reached, it's very high. But in order to reach that, so there is only the only way is to use feedback from the users, which complain, for example, in a real estate cadastre, something is registered in the wrong way, so user reports on that and they correct it. So the more users information is provided by the users, the better will be the quality of the data. Currently, we have 25 state informational resources integrated. It's a lot of data, and I will show you a little bit later the structure. So we have 59 e-services, 20 through the info intermediaries I mentioned, and with the some with the users of open data applications, and more than 4 million services have already been rendered through this system. So this is a very informative slide. It's the information resources that have been integrated in the all-state information system. We can state that here we have the majority of the information resources actually existing in the country. I mean, the key ones, the main ones. I mean, the main, which are not owned by one specific authority, common ones. And the open data can be published there. It's not the Ministry of Communication or somebody else is deciding that, so it's so the owner of these information resources can decide which data to publish there, not some central authority. And so here you see a lot of letters and digits, but the most important part is emergence of the API. API on one part, a user can get a chance to check data in the portal, but he won't be actually able to use this data. It won't be convenient because he would have to download some data to some catalog, to some folder, and they are downloading all the data, and it's a mess. My personal point of view that we have to work with the information resources. Your system gets an API. The legal basis is formed in cooperation with the authorities, and then you get access to some data, which are open data, and then you start to use them in your system. For example, we all use some programs, applications which show the schedule of the bars that you use. We don't go to a website, we use an application on our mobile to check when the next bus is coming. This is an example. And the most important thing is that there will be a portal with some information published, and users will understand which data sets are there and how to use them. But we, as the state, have to give the priority to the structured data and provide them to the user. And where is the portal? So portal is all over the structure. So it is a set of databases, a set of server applications, web applications, and the portal is developed by Novacom company on base of platform which already exists. You don't have to buy a new database, don't have to buy server application. It will be different from the visually. It will have a different domain name, IP address, but it will function in all the so it will interact with all these other applications, portals, having different purposes. So portal is a system. The resources are not a system. It's something that provides data. Portal just addresses these resources through the OX bars and gets the data. And it's an interface between the data and the user. So we have several layers. First layer is the data informational resources. There is a nucleus driver that can get this, retrieve this information, and there is an API that can provide it to the user. And who is the key user of this data? in which areas is it more efficient? In all areas. All areas, well, it's clear, but maybe you have some examples. So the main users are now from the business area. Citizens unfortunately do not use it actively. The reason is quite simple. In order to get access to this data, you need identification. So the key with digital and electronic signature, he has this key, but citizens, physical persons, natural persons, they don't have this key, so that they cannot get access to the data. Maybe in future every citizen will have this key, but currently business users actually are the priority, and they have the access. So, and companies doing the private business, and they know how to check different enterprises. So there is no, it's not necessary to make a separate channel with the Ministry of Taxation, for example. They just can use the open data to check other companies and their activity. Okay, thanks. Business is clear, but the life cycle of ecosystems, what do you think of that? Life cycle of ecosystems. We mentioned the ecosystems of the life cycle of administrative procedures. So this topic is beyond the framework of our today's, beyond the scope of our today's conference. So it's an opportunity for a citizen to apply, submit some application, and then to get a result of the implementation of administrative procedure without him actually going somewhere to visiting some authority. You just get a notification. For example, if you apply, if you want to register as a person who needs some housing, so you just register and then you get a notification that you've been registered. So you don't need to physically visit that place to get this notification. Good afternoon. What is the difference between the data received from the open data portal and data received from the catalog? So here we ensure the integrity, trustworthiness, and the data received from Kartotek or catalog. So these were the data processed by an intermediary, and whether you trust them or not, it's okay. It's your choice. Getting data from the catalog, you get the data that you get, same data that you get through the bus from the API, and probably depending on what you ask and about whom what you ask and what legal requirements are applied to that. Maybe you can get some additional data from some additional sources, because talking about open data and how it is developed in the state infrastructure. So this is the central, the center of electronic services, and they decide which data will be used and how they will be provided. But we, as a business, we just follow the demands of the society. We don't invent which data are needed. So if data A and data B are requested, and the data A are provided through the IS system, so we'll provide them. These are most clear and most verified data. So even in case of collision, we can show the source and prove the trustworthiness the data. But if, for example, this data set B is requested and on IRIS it's not provided, it needs some manual processing, some analysis of several data sources, then this information, which is in format which cannot be processed by the machine. So then you have to take the data from the catalog. And which sources, data sources you mean, which the catalog or Kartoteka will use? Well, the business demands, like, you know, needs more and more transparent data. It's a global trend, and in Belarus the situation is quite similar. And I mean, the state portal, the Russian data, official data, because 20% of demand on data in Belarus, it's like it's legal data, and most of the commodity turnover is forwarded to the Russian Federation. So, and it's connected with this process. I just mean that as far as the open data are concerned, so I think that the right people are now dealing with that, and the right authorities. So when ICE was just formed and we got an idea of this catalog, so we know how it was started. For example, last year we conducted a polling on demand of open data, and we were interviewing all the customers, and our customers really provided the feedback. They spent some time on that, and really it was very useful, and it helped us to implement some solutions and innovations. So we of course can discuss the catalog or Kartoteka system a little later. So Vyacheslav mentioned different jurisdictions. What are those? So you said that, maybe if I'm not mistaken, you said that the Open Data Portal will work with your system via an API, right? Portal is a part of the system. Portal is just an application. It's just like that. And because the environment to make requests, so you don't need any other application for that. You can use the already existing portal to address same information and resources. So, okay, you have register of companies, of entities. Will it be published in the portal as a single file, whole data set, or will it be a service? So, will it be as a list, or will it be kind of a service where you just have to enter the key and then you get information on one company? Yeah. Well, it's yeah, you can get a full list as well. So you can see the whole list of all the Russian companies as one file, as one list. Because when we worked with the Stadt Ukrainian company, we've got a different result, and the difference was 100,000 entities.
So let me explain. If by law it's allowed that these data sets can be sent in dumps, then we will be offering a service that will transmit data in dumps with this field composition. I mean, nobody's going to deliver a whole table to you. If this is not part of the legislation, then it is not going to happen. We are now creating a platform that will allow working with transactions and with data. But then it's a question to legislators. If there is a law, you will get it. So, Julie, are we going to have the legislation in place? We will. By the time the portal is launched, we need to develop the regulatory framework. I mean, the point purely technological, I can't imagine an API request. API request is typically a search request. This is an old-fashioned dilemma. There is a technology in place.
Здесь вопрос в
What we're
другом.
lacking
Большое
is
количество компаний
legislation to this
на
effect.
самом деле это
Actually, it's a much bigger
формирование
question
состава
of
так называемых открытых данных, большое
developing
усилие
the
с ручной загрузкой на
uh,
портал, который
composition
по сути
of
если непонятно, что представляет, это будет мое
manually
личное мнение. То есть
loaded data.
есть информация, которая
There
не
is
сформирована как
information
информационный ресурс.
that is not
Но тот либо иной
formulated as an
автор, да,
information resource, but
захотел
some parties
где-то
still
пожертвовать,
require
где-то его
it.
загружать в портал, и относиться к этим данным серьезно, с моей точки зрения, очень невозможно.
Treating this data as
Серьезно
something
можно относиться
serious is
к тем данным,
impossible.
которые
You can
есть
treat with
в
in
данном
earnest only
спасибо
that
сказать,
data that is classified
да,
as the
там есть понятие
information
введения
resource,
информационного ресурса, там есть
with
понятие
all the
управления, понятие
respective
выгрузки, понятие
fields,
управления,
loading,
оптимизация всего этого.
unloading
Как
procedure.
только данные
As
делаются
soon
внутрянки,
as
по
data
умолчанию просто
is
непонятно какой
like
информации.
a shake and bake data,
Спасибо
then
за большое
it's the wrong
обозначение.
kind
Может,
of
мы можем вернуться к
information.
нему еще
I
позже. Сейчас
think we
хотелось бы
can
все-таки
go
продолжить
back to this point later, but now
рассказом об опыте
I
Украины,
will
потому
divert
что
you
мы
to
вот только начинаем
Ukrainian
внедрение, да,
experience because
мне
we're
кажется,
still
в
in the
Украине уже
still in the
какой-то
process
просто
of
бум
creating and
и
designing, whereas
сферы открытых
Ukraine
данных.
is
И вот
experiencing
на
an
международной
explosion
конференции в Буэнос-Айресе Украину упоминали,
of
наверное, на
this
каждой
technology. I think
дискуссионной панели,
each
как
discussion
появилась
panel
успеха. Хотелось бы
mentioned it as a
спросить,
success story
вы, с одной стороны,
at the
состоите в
Buenos
сообществе
Aires
открытых данных, с другой стороны, вы
conference. So I would
занимаетесь
ask Alexei to shed some
разработкой
light
международного портала по
on
миграции.
it.
Почему вы, делаете бизнес с
Why
открытыми данными в Украине, и,
do you do business
вот ваш
with open
опыт
data in Ukraine?
разработки?
And what is your development
Так
experience?
получается, что мы пришли в открытые данные в тот день, когда на
We
формировании
came
открытых данных
to use open
был
data
опубликован реестр компаний,
when a
и мы
registry
увидели,
of
что первым
companies was
запустили
listed.
регистрировать, а во-вторых, через неделю этот
And we
реестр
realized
обновится, мы сделаем эти
that
анализы, что
this
компания,
register would
что-то
be
изменилось,
updated if there are any changes
это
that
будет
took
сегодня
place.
email, мессенджер, неважно
We
как,
will
но
notify
мы сможем создать
the countries
очень
the
простой
companies about it by
сервис
email
для ваших
or
активов в плане корпоративных прав, то есть
through a
фактически
different
защита
medium,
трейдерства. И
thereby protecting
так
them
получилось,
against
что
raiding.
сделав этот простой сервис,
So
мы
having
получили
created this
большое количество пользователей,
simple
и тут мы
service, we
поняли, что на
obtained
самом
a
деле
lot of clients
в Украине сейчас просто огромное
and
количество
realized that
открытых данных,
there is a lot of
и
tons of
просто
open data
мы
in
обязаны
Ukraine,
это продолжать.
and we
И,
must
соответственно, сейчас у нас
continue
250
doing
тысяч
something with it. So now we have
пользователей
250,000
наших
users
мессенджерах, чат-ботов
in
и около
chatbots,
тысячи
in
компаний,
messengers,
которые имеют своих
and about
CRM,
1,000
ERP-систем, 20
companies have CRMs or
они
RPC systems.
все эти данные.
They all
Агрегируем
have
данные
this
с
data. We
систем
aggregate
и
data from
наша
all the
идеальная
ministries,
ситуация, когда бухгалтер
and
пытается
ideally,
создать платеж, а мы
an
говорим,
accountant tries
система
to
говорит, нет, не
create a
надо.
transaction, and the
То есть
system
мы
would
даже
prompt
уже сейчас
against it.
интегрируем огромное количество
So already now,
систем,
oodles of
и
information
для нас
systems have been
бизнеса
integrated, and for us,
очень важно,
this
то,
is an
чтобы
important
те
business
истории, открытые
to
данные
make sure
получает
that
бизнес сообщество,
open
чтобы это был
data
эффективный
instruments
инструмент, чтобы он
are
был простым,
effective,
чтобы он
simple,
самим распорядителям было легко, комфортно
easy
публиковать там данные,
to,
пользователям
to
получать.
use for
Соответственно,
publishing
мы
or receiving, depending
приняли
on which
участие
end
и
you are.
разработали
So
верифицированную
we
новую версию.
upgraded
И, по сути, если сейчас уже так
a version,
перспективно смотреть,
and looking in
то что такое
retrospect,
портал
what's an
открытых
open
данных?
data
Это
portal?
точка, где
It's
встречаются
a
три
point of
источника.
conversion
Первое — это
of three
законодательство.
essences. First,
Здесь
it's the
мнение,
legislation.
что более чем
In
500
Ukraine,
есть
things are hunky-dory in that regard. We have the public information law, we have ways through which you can obtain the data, and there is the resolution by the Council of Ministers with 600 data sets, which all
И здесь вот возвращаясь к тому, что
agencies
в
should
вашем
publish
портале
on their
не
portals.
будет какого-то обязаловки,
I mean,
хорошая идея — это просто попросить публиковать
it's a good
бюджет.
idea to
Потому что, насколько я понимаю,
publish
бюджет есть у каждого
publish your
потребителя,
budget.
и бюджет
I mean,
этот
each
требует, что интересно, да, сколько
budget
вот министерство тратит.
spender
И, соответственно, это
has
уже
a
записано
certain
в
spending
835
pattern and
постановлении
expenditures,
Кабмина, где сказано, что каждый распорядитель должен
and each
сначала в первую очередь опубликовать
fiscal
бюджет,
entity should
запросы публичной информации,
publish
дальше, то есть большой набор обязательных
a
полей.
budget, and
И что
there is a
характерно,
list of compulsory fields,
в украинском
and
постановлении еще и записаны все 6
all
принципов
six
открытых данных,
principles of
которые
open data
сформулированы, то есть
are
про
included in the Ukrainian
инклюзивность и
law. I
дальше.
mean,
Соответственно,
inclusiveness
то
and
есть
so
первая
on.
часть законодательства.
So
Вторая
the
часть это
first
безусловно
pillar
команда,
is
которая этим всем
legislation. The
занимается.
second
И в
pillar
Украине
is the
есть
team that is
как
going,
агентство
that is doing all of it.
державного электронного самоврядування, которое занимается именно порталом и открытыми
In
данными. Там
in
есть
Ukraine, we have this team
НГО, которые ТАПАС и
plus
Фонд
an
Восточной Европы, которые
NGO,
помогают эти все
Eastern
направления
Europe and
развивать. Соответственно,
PASS
это
NGOs,
все позволяет
who
отвечать,
provide the backstopping.
показывать, помогать совершенствовать информационные системы, чтобы данные доходили до
So they
портала.
make sure that the
И
data
самое главное,
reaches the
это
portal.
общество, которое
And the third
встречается с этими
essential
данными. И,
pillar
соответственно,
is
если
the
взять
public or
16-17
community that
год,
gathers, that meets with this
когда
data.
в 2016 году
Uh,
порталом
Looking
пользовались
in
в основном
perspective,
активисты, для них было важно,
in
чтобы
2016 it's
информация
only
можно хоть
activists
как-то
who
визуализировать,
used
использовать,
the
то
data.
в конце 16-го,
Toward the
18
end
бизнес
of
вовлечены,
16 and
такие
early
компании, как
17,
мы,
businesses
Telephone
stepped
Dash,
forward and
куча
exclaimed,
важных
"This is
информации.
great, useful
И,
information
естественно,
for
мы поставили
everybody."
более на профессиональную
So
основу,
we
когда
try to
в тот момент,
professionalize
когда,
it
например, набор
so that when a data set is not published for 2-3 days when it should have been published, we stopped writing letters. We write a letter once a day and it still works. So the entities see that their data is in heavy use. If something is wrong with the file, they will be notified immediately. And now in 2018, regular citizens visit the portal. And when we speak of the portal, we don't mention some big files that you need to download first. Most of the files are already available on the portal, CFC files that you can put in the table and run a search. 4 GB dumps don't fit too well, but smaller size are well accommodated by the portal. So we can see that journalists and citizens don't need to have extra special skills to see what kind of budget expenditures have been incurred in a respective municipality. They can download it in Excel, convert it into something more readable, and everything will be fine. So when the question arose about a new version of the portal, we first decided that quality comes first. Feedback is critical. Making feedback public, because we write to entities that they need an extra column, but now all these requests are published on the portal, and you can enter the data set yourself and see for yourself what kind of feedback has been generated, what kind of suggestions have been made, and the entities realize that it's open for everybody, and they feel obliged to respond. Seeing the data and realizing that the data is about you is a crucial part of the new and improved portal. Coming back to why open data is necessary in the first place, we debate a lot about it, and we see direct benefits for the government to publish that data, not because it's under pressure to do so. It's a great excuse in 2018, in the 21st century. It makes perfect sense to talk to the society, not through press releases, but using data, using numbers, using analytical info that can be prepared by data journalists. The silliest thing is we take a data set on crimes, for example, carried out by drunk people, let's say. We compare Lviv and Kharkiv, and we see that there is a dramatic difference. Why? Because prohibition on sales of alcohol after 11 p.m. was introduced in one of the cities. Alexei, can you tell us what was the main pain that you passed through when updating your portal? There was no pain involved. We,
пользователей и разработчиков, безусловно, как в любой разработке, у вас
as
есть
in
идеология системы,
any
которую вы
other
развиваете, то есть
product, there is
схема есть,
certain
какая-то своя
ideology
идеология,
that you
которую вы
follow,
выполняете, и есть идеология заказчика,
and
и
there
то,
is
что говорит
the
закон. И
customer's
если вступление,
ideology or the
например, поле
law.
описания это не обязательное поле описания набора, то вы не
Description of
обязательно
data
будет.
set
Поэтому
is
у нас
compulsory
применяется
by
термин,
law,
приводим одно к
so
другому.
we reconcile these things.
Платформа, которая была выбрана в качестве
The platform
основы нового
chosen
портала.
as the foundation of the new formal. Any questions from the floor?
My name is Vladimir, operator of information portal. I have a question to both speakers. Do you have experience of publishing of open data by business? So does business have intent to provide this data, and is the demand to receive this data from private companies? And are these systems that are being developed, are they providing for such data sources? Because now we see that the system uses mainly state-owned information resources, which can be regulated by law. But do you think about using some other data sources? The best example is BlaBlaCar in Ukraine. It published aggregated data on trips, journeys, and this is a very good information for bus operators, where they can use the new rules, bus rules. So this is where big business wants to publish data, and also understands that it's economically feasible because it can sell it, something provided for free, but something is sold. I'm communicating with 4 large companies in Ukraine, and probably it won't be the open data portal, state-owned portal, but something else will be set up, but something is coming, and it doesn't matter whether it's state-owned or private-owned. So first of all, we don't have open data portal yet. When I was invited to this forum, I thought, well, I don't like to tell about something which is not existing yet. But however, as far as the business, its information resources are concerned, so we are now actively cooperating with one of the communities. They create, in cooperation with us, information resource, which is not state-owned. The access to this resource will be regulated by a business entity, and access to any system, our system, there is no ban on working with business. So you can use the data both as a data source or data user, so there are no restrictions. So only the state-owned resources have these restrictions, but other information systems can be used for your benefit. But the only difference is that the financing for state-owned resources is provided by the state budget, and if you develop your own business concept and develop your own resource, you have to invest money yourself. So, but the restrictions on use of these bars, of this mechanism, there are no such. Just come and implement your ideas. Alexei, please explain. So the data sets from business and from state-owned resources, how do you check the trustworthiness of this information, and what is the responsibility of this data providers for the reliability and trustworthiness? Of course, I'm not a team which provides support to the portal. Based on our experience, of course, it's clear that open data, yeah, we have the right to use them, and we have to make reference to them. So all these files are stored in the portal, and this is the responsibility of the manager who is responsible for distribution of the public open information. So, and for example, if this is an abstract from the register, so it doesn't matter for a user. So for them, most important is the culture of data usage, because a lot of data is published. Very often people don't really understand what is actually published about them. A lot of individual entrepreneurs, sole proprietors in Ukraine, they're very surprised that the home addresses are published in the state register, publicly available, and they state that home address, and for example, a person can check who else is living in his house in the same building, other sole proprietors. Well, so, and the reliability or trustworthiness of the data is provided, ensured by the manager then. So I don't want to argue with you, but I will just mention, yeah, I understand why you ask this. The data integrity and trustworthiness of data can be confirmed only by one mechanism, and this is digital and electronic signature. And the only place where we can avoid that is when we create trusted state environment, state-owned environment, and data which get there, so they are first have to be signed, and then they are retrieved. You work in a trusted environment. So, and when you just get some Excel files, it's just whether it's trustworthy or not. It's just a garbage if you don't know how the reliability can be confirmed. And if the data which can identify me is published as a set, so then you can really sue the entity that published this data. So I mean this Ukrainian example when the sole proprietors complained that their home address is published there. So, well, if you ask a question, how can we trust the data? We can trust the data which have been formed only according to the rules, which are legally bound, which are fixed, defined. Other data are just set of data, and you might trust them or not. You can't really prove whether this data are correct. So you, as a representative of FC, you will probably understand what is the interest of international institutions, why do they need the open data to exist in the country, and how does it affect the international interaction. And can you tell about your projects implemented in the country? Well, I'm representing the International Corporation, World Bank Group. So we are investors, financial organization. It's not very common for me to visit such conferences. Thank you for invitation. So my main function to make investments in countries where we work. We operate in 180 countries, and we are very careful with the data. We've been working for 60 years in 180 countries, so we have accumulated huge amount of data, of course. And just want to show you several references, links to resources published by us. For example, we understand that having such an immense amount of data, we have to make them accessible by users. And this is the resource of open data of the World Bank Group, where you can make organized search by country, filtered by country, and you will see that also data can be filtered by more than 2,400 indicators like trade, economy, economic development, and the Belarusian profile is of very high quality. This is one of the resources where you can see the big data sets represented very efficiently. And also we looked at the different ratings of development of e-governance, participatory budget, and we've seen that during the recent years, the Belarus taken higher and higher, is ranked higher and higher in these ratings. And when investor decides whether to enter this or that country, he first Googles it and reads what's been told about the country by some reliable sources. Then he looks at the ratings. So that's why ranking of the country in different ratings is very important. It's very interesting, whether it's competitiveness development or e-services development. So for investors, it's a very significant indicator, either positive or negative. And I'd like to tell you about one resource which is now being developed, and I'd like to tell what we would like to make of it and which concept we would like to implement in it. Sergey is smiling, but yeah, I understand why. So I will tell why we as an IFC decided to support this instrument. So after working in various countries, financing business, we've seen a lot of problems that business is encountering, and the problem of business environment, investment climate, administrative procedures. And after working in so many countries, we've seen how the countries are coping with that. And in Belarus in 2015, we made a polling among 1,200 sole proprietors, and we asked them about their problems and challenges. And in 2013, the business defined three key problems. One is the access to the financing, which is a traditional problem that was just before the recession, and it was already there, the problem. The second was a lot of frequent changes in the legislation. Even if they are positive, it's not very convenient for business if it's too frequent. And the third one was that the administrative procedures were too complex. And when we started to analyze it further, what exactly is difficult, what is complex, and we found out that SME doesn't have the time to study these procedures, administrative procedures, different levels, layers, interactions. They don't have time for that. There are some different also attitudes of different authorities to these procedures. Example is, for example, a case with a food truck placement regulations, and in the online information resource we've seen we've read an article that young guys, they purchased some food trucks and they decided to provide catering services. So the target was during the summer trying to sell the burgers, pizzas, coffee in the main square in Minsk, Oktябрьская square. And first the authorities couldn't understand whether to permit them or not, because the regulations are very vague. It was not possible to understand whether they can really sell it in the main square, can they connect to the power supply. But they did it all correct. They made all contracts with sanitary authorities, but they didn't get the permission. Finally, they could find a place, some other place. So it means that it's not banned in general. It's just that in the main square, they, for some reason, couldn't allow them. So, and the administrative procedures once was very high, like thousands of them. Then it was reduced to several hundreds, and now we have like 750 administrative procedures. It's an average, but the business still states that it's still too high. It was the reason why we worked with the Ministry of Economy on this issue, and we had an idea that we had to create an information portal so that business can get access to in description of all administrative procedures in one place. And then this idea was modified step by step, and then it developed into what we are having now. It's so several distinguishing features of that is like that there is e-register of administrative procedures. So we already have a prototype online, so you can go there and take a look. So this is resource which contains all the information about all the administrative procedures, but a lot depends on who fills it in, because earlier when there were attempts to create such a resource, it was filled by some just people, volunteers, who didn't have reliable sources, who did not update it, and it was not lasting long. The resources, this was just stopped and closed. But here the information has to be provided by the state authorities. So, and the state authorities that have logins and keys, they enter it and fill in the information. So now in this portal we already have 140 procedures described, but now we are waiting for the new decree on administrative procedures with a new list of procedures, so we're not updating the list, we are waiting for the decree to be implemented.
In addition, we will put up a list of business situations, as they're called. Why is it important? Administrative procedures are interesting when they're linked to certain business situations. It's not like signing a contract or applying for something. It's the interaction which is important. For example, getting access to certain premises or opening a catering and food store over a certain square meters. Of course, we want to show the most typical business situations, and now our lawyers and us are trying to describe the most typical standardized situations. Therefore, we engaged LGO company in the past 2 years, a developer of the resource. And it is to be filled out by state authorities, and they will be obliged to track and update that information. When the site started to transform into something more meaningful, we realized that more stakeholders need to be engaged. Therefore, we cooperate with the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Justice. We work with other providers of data from the government circles, and perhaps in the future we could implement an implementational component. Even in Singapore, not all of the transactions are executed online, so we have no illusions whatsoever regarding this in Belarus, but still we gotta keep a good face, because knocking on doors of officials and trying to get get an appointment with them is wrong, essentially. We believe that this tool could be a good way for business / government interaction. Business will be able to leave information on how they pass through various procedures, indicate or identify some inaccuracies or gaps, and the government will better realize what procedures need to be in place, because now nobody knows what kind of procedures are most called for. What was the dynamics behind usage of procedures in the years before? So this is bound to help the government add transparency to the regulatory policies concerning business climate. Some procedures are not tapped into for years, which is a direct indication that they can be tapered off. If some procedures cause difficulties again, it's a good evidence and justification. They need to be simplified. The World Bank utilizes annual direct compliance cost savings, and based on preliminary estimate, we expect 10 million reduction of cost savings per year, which is time that will be saved or avoided walking from office to office, collecting papers, you know, for monkey business. At the end, I wanted to reiterate that the instrument is still in the stage of development, and in the next few years, we're going to continue to support this tool so the business would get access to bonuses and benefits that it deserves. I have an immediate question to you, Olga. You said that the registry of business or administrative procedures will help understand which procedures are called for and which are less frequently used. Will it be known to the public? Yes, we wanted to make those meters publicly available online so that everyone could see which procedures are used and which are not. Any questions? You mentioned that procedure owners, like public authorities, let's say there is a procedure that causes a lot of controversy, highly complicated, intricate, hard to get through. What is the motivation of that government authority to monitor and track feedback, to measure and evaluate the appropriateness of the procedure? Or will they be worried only about the need to integrate that procedure in the body of law and make sure that it is timely updated, but as to breaking it down into two simple procedures, it will be none of their concern. What motivation is typically a carrot, you know? What can you use as a carrot? When the government authorities realize that they're going to save time, which would be otherwise spent explaining to people the procedure, I guess their motivation could be that they will save time, which will be relieved or released rather to engage with other business. But there is always a stick to every carrot. Now the President is going to sign an updated list of procedures, and it's all in line with decree number 7 on small and medium-sized entrepreneurship support. Okay, let's say there is an administrative procedure, like getting a statement from single government registry. I mean, there is a very good gear which helps you generate an electronic document with one push of a button. And you can check if the state tax has been paid or not. This administrative procedure has been around for years. So how can a ministry be motivated to repudiate or cancel or simplify that procedure? I guess that 20% of costs will be saved immediately upon cancellation of it. I will try to answer this question. Colleague will not be able to do so. First of all, you need to distinguish between the law writers or law drafters and law implementers. They are disjointed groups. The legislative and the executive branches of power. Well, the executive may be lucky enough to contribute to the law drafting activity, but that contribution is very limited. So the Ministry of Justice tried to prove that this procedure, single government registry, is not completely efficient, and the 70 procedures that are listed in the Ministry of Economy's regulation are not an exhaustive list, because there are other associated administrative procedures, and EGR is a private case of administrative practice. I know that a certain plan is being put together, plan of action by the government, and the draft stipulates re-engineering of procedures, meaning, well, I disagree with the task setting, but the carrot stick thing always works in any country. So what's important is that the government would assume the task and they distribute among the stakeholders. There is a procedure to implement e-government, to bring many procedures online, and a formal conversion of what's available into electronic format is a pointless set of actions. As you convert into electronic format, it would turn out that 3 procedures are no longer necessary, and 1 procedure will suffice with certain steps associated with it. This electronic set of procedures is what I consider to be a catalog. This is the golden standard, I would say. What should happen next is the opportunity to select a business situation. Then you go into your office and create a business. And if you're dealing with enterprise registration, then you can look it up in the single enterprise registry, but now you can do it via the portal.
Я чувствую недостаток секции по НИГОУ. Очевидный. Я бы хотела вернуться к данным
I wanted to go back to
и
the data
практическому использованию данных.
and practical use
И
of
я
data,
сейчас слово
and give the
Кузнецову.
floor to Pavel
В
Kuznetsov,
недвижимости открытые
who will
данные очень
talk about
хорошо и эффективно
real
можно
estate
использовать.
or property
И есть мировые
data,
примеры,
and there are
практики, которые
global
работают с
cases,
исследованиями, которые уже сейчас нам доступны.
success
И какие
stories
данные не
of
хватает.
dealing with such data and which data is lacking.
Я представляю
Yes, I represent
сообщество, которое
the
является
community,
реально большим
which is a heavy user of big data, both open
в этой секции, так и в секции,
and
в зале можем представлять.
confidential.
Ежедневно потребляем
Annually,
большой объем информации.
we consume and process a lot of data, and based on the processed data, we make decisions.
Операции с достаточно дорогостоящим имуществом.
Since we're dealing with high-value property and assets, typically this is the most valuable assets owned by individuals, we make hard decisions sometimes to make a transaction or not. So the data is needed to inform a proper decision.
Можем также являться в нашей стране, как уже являемся потребителем этих данных,
We can also
заказчиком
be the
каких-то дополнительных средств,
requesting
получать эти
party for data,
знакомиться с этим.
not only the users of data.
Импонирует
I'm really sympathetic with the North American experience.
и просто получают эти данные. Перед началом
People there get data very easily. We've had a brief discussion with the colleague. What qualifies as an open data? For example, people don't use open data because you need to have a digital signature. So, can the data generated through digital signature can be considered as open data? In North America, this is truly and genuinely open data. I enter the portal and I can see open data with no digital signature authentication or any other authentication. So I understand that this is open data. Well, I can punch in my social security number and get extra data. In Belarus, now things have gotten simpler. I can get digital signature via my SIM card. I, for example, use corporate um, communications, so I can get my own SIM card, creating new problems. So there is a fine line between what data can be considered as open and which not. Sometimes we refuse a deal because it can be rendered null and void. But we made the decision based on certain data, so people who anticipated that dealing become frustrated over the denial of this dealing. And then what are the grounds on which you refuse the deal? So the question is, can we disclose the source of data, the content of data? On the one hand, this data wasn't confidential. On the other, there is always a caveat that this is for personal use. Yes, we received it, we applied it, we made a decision. And we can disclose the source of data to our customer. That's the problem. Recently, the world has transformed dramatically. Our clientele has changed too. And we're modifying our processes. During one of the conferences, the Deputy Director of Presidential Administration said, I don't visit places that I don't have to visit. I mean, you can order it electronically. I would try to stay afloat, and as Mr. Rudnev pointed out, if everything turns out well, we are the customers of the project that, or the draft law, the project that will end up amongst the single enterprise registry. Some of it will be open, some of it will be secret. And this nascent project has already stirred and elicited wide public discussion. We suspended this discussion for a while. The licensing ministry has contributed to the debate considerably because they don't know to which extent businesses and individuals and licensees need the data. It could be a resource set up, established by a business, or it could later turn into the government-owned information resource. And since I am an international realtor, member of the American Realtor Association, real estate developer association, I sometimes make contributions to certain journals and getting. Can you give specific examples? Yes, I'm just getting to. I need to fill out a field, the level of property ownership in Belarus. I'm sure this information is available with the National Statistics Committee. I'm sure this information is not confidential, but looking for it and finding it is next to impossible. The level of profit generated by realtors over certain years, that I can find. So I guess simplifying search of data is what should be achieved. Open data is all nice and well. It helps you make quick decisions, look for something, but if for some open data is a huge boon, you need to remember that provision of open data can harm the others. Time permitting, I can show some slides evidencing that, but still you need to treat open data with care.
So I haven't given the floor yet to the speaker who is the closest to our daily life. She's an architect and urbanist, and she's working in Serебyanka project. Serebyanka is a residential area in Minsk. So, can you tell about the main idea of this project and how can this big data, open data, help you in this project? So, in general, I can mention that first we worked inter-building territories, and now we are working with inter-courtyard territories, and soon we'll are going to make the new project, the new design of the residential areas. So we have a lot of new technologies, new instruments for design, experts, but there is no data because we need to know the structure, demographic structure of the residential areas. We need to know how many apartments are rented out, what are the transport challenges, what are the other bottlenecks. So it's very difficult to make just to request the data from the statistical committee, and it would be very good to have this data available. So we work with a lot of organizations which are supporting us, where we can make, and but in order to make the dialogue with efficient, so we also have to understand who are these people, what is their gender, what is their age, education. Now we are trying to do it intuitively, but we cannot get across the main message why we have actually visited them. And when we work with the different area zones in the city, we are talking about the inclusive environment for people with problems with their mobility. And in Sri Lanka, for example, there are a lot of parents with children younger than 7 years old, but this is like word of mouth. We don't know exactly, as we don't know, for example, that this and that number of handicapped persons living there, wheelchair disabled persons. If we would have this data, it would be much easier, and then we would be able to convince people that they need to change the environment they live in. And for example, when we, based on our early experience, when we make a playground and then we get some teenagers and children, and come in, the local residents are surprised that we have so many children and teenagers living in the area. We didn't know. But, well, if we don't know the exact figures, you can't convince people that some changes are needed, and people themselves are not aware of what is needed in the place they live, in the area they live. Now the mechanisms to get this data is either non-existing or too complex, and it would be much easier and more efficient to work if we would have open data available. A question to Belstat, to Yulia. So, is it possible to publish such data in the open data portal? Can I start? Well, let's start. Let's not demonize Belstat. Belstat is not the institution which has the information what people in Minsk eat at breakfast. It's for breakfast. The information that we provide is ordered by the state. Our customer is the state. We collect some data sets from legal persons. We don't collect any data from natural persons. and we get just aggregated data from other ministries, from registry offices, from the executive committees, etc., etc. So that's why we are not concealing any data. We sometimes just don't have it. Along with that, there are standard procedures that are described in the regulations, and you can use these mechanisms. If we have data, we will provide it. A lot being said that Bellstart site is not efficient, it's not possible to retrieve and find necessary data. Well, partially you're right. The search engine might be not very efficient, but we have a different task now. We want to publish as much data as possible. Yes, we have our own internal plans to increase every year the number of indicators, the frequency of data updating, the data proliferation. But after everything will be launched, we will provide the data that we have, and business using API can make iconographics very beautiful. Well, what do you think? If the portal is too good, users just don't need you. Well, the portal will be good, but data collection is to be done by us.
Юлия, вот для таких задач, которые решает
So the
Надежда,
tasks
нужны
which
достаточно
are
подробные. И когда мы проводили исследование
settled
спроса,
by
мы тоже
Nadezhda,
спрашивали многие проблемы при работе с
she
данными
needs
были
very
выявлены.
detailed data, and
И слишком большая агрегация, слишком высокий уровень агрегации
so too much aggregation
информатора, как
when
достаточное
data is not detailed
оформление
enough, not
вызывает
updated frequently enough.
определенные
This
результаты.
all were
Как эти
listed
все
as the
проблемы будут
main
решаться в
problems
Болгарии? И возможно ли вот
with
такой
data in
запрос
Belarus. How will these challenges be settled? How will the portal help with it? So in order to settle this issue, well, there is no portal yet, and it will be difficult to reply how to use the portal to settle issues. When we have the portal, I will tell you more exactly. And regarding Nadezhda's request, so I think she has to contact me, and we will, together with other authorities, relevant authorities, we will try to provide her with all the data she needs. I'd like just to add, I was really impressed by your statement that you can't request information from Bellstart. No, Bellstart, any person, any organization can request information from it. And one more thing, it might be useful to you that we have a database on statistical database for the whole population with this broken down into different age groups, and soon we'll have another. So can you provide information on the residential area or the whole city? So the START is a Republican organization which is dealing with the data for the country as a whole. We have data for specific regions, districts, but it will be easier to apply to the central office in Minsk, and this is our subordinate organization, and I think they have this data. As far as I remember, for those who cannot use search engines well, yeah. So Bellstart has a service for some fee. They can process data themselves, provide you with an infographic. So 2 years ago, when these discussions only started about open data, so at that time there were a lot of statements and and entities, business entities said that they didn't need unprocessed data, but this is work that has to be done. Mm, if you get raw data, it's for free, but if you need processed data, something should be charged. In under the current conditions, uh, so it's easy to criticize Bellstar, but well, you might pay and you will get the process data. If you are not experienced user, then you have to pay. If you want to get something for free, just acquire some skills. So, but Bellstar data are collected, are funded by our using our taxpayers' money, but it is collected, it is published, that was paid by the taxpayers. But processing of data, well, anybody can learn how to do it and use it. So Bellstat is very often mentioned in all discussions regarding data because it's the main interface. This is where everybody sends requests when he needs data, and data collected by the National Statistical Agency based on specific procedures and rules, and whether there are new rules coming, like in urban or town planning. So it has to undergo some legal procedure before this mechanism can be used. It's not the problem, not the failure of the National Statistical Agency. We're now analyzing which challenges are in general existing and which data maybe should be less aggregated, which where are the areas for investments by the state authorities and by the private companies, what has to be improved, and this has to be discussed. We shouldn't say that there are two options. You either pay or you have to learn how to do it and to search yourself. So there are a lot of areas and directions for development, challenges to be settled. Yeah, well, very simple example. Bellstat has statistic on external trade and statistics of foreign international trade. So in this database, there is a limitation of 10,000 lines. Strings. You can't make a request containing more than 10,000 lines. And the recent updates introduced internal limitations, 5,000 lines in separate files. It's as far as the inability to search data is concerned. And as far as the opportunity to work with Bellstar is concerned, me as a natural person quite frequently get information from Bellstat. I just send the request and there is no problem to get a reply. It's very easy to communicate with the press service, press center. They prepare the data. It's not even 14 days, which they can process according to the law, and I got data on lethality from 0 to 17 years from on this age group just within 1 day. But of course, using the databases can be a problem. It's not sometimes even that you don't know how to use them. There are a lot of mistakes in these databases. They were prepared not by very skilled people. It's the problem of the database. There are mistakes, errors, and they are edited permanently. And I have found a mistake like yesterday. So it's not always the users who are to be blamed for inability to find the data. Well, I don't think we have to look for somebody to blame. I think that when there is a request from urban developers, it's not a criticizing Bellstat. It's a question whether we can provide this data and whether we can help in some way to get the data. And I think that the success of the portal is that we should stop using this position of attacking and protecting yourself. I want to get back to the Sergei's presentation, and when he mentioned the purity of data and creation of resources, which benefits this development, because there is a two-way process, supplier and consumer of the data, and it helps to develop, to improve, to clear the data. So, yeah, you find the data, errors in the data, and you report about that, and we repair them. But mistakes are everywhere in the state register of entities, business entities. There are also a lot of mistakes, and the most important is that we try to improve it. We report about that. Somebody has to report, find the mistake, then report, and then the error has to be corrected. And I mean that all the recent presentations, in all of them it was mentioned that when we start exchanging the data, when we understand what is in demand, what is not in demand, where, so we have to understand where there is a feedback available, where more digitalization is needed, maybe based on geographical areas like a city, a region, and for example, urban developers. 7 years ago, we didn't even know who are they. So who are the main players? Who needs data? So that's why the sooner we start the process, the better. But when 200,000 people working with this data every day, and then it comes to our support, and it's one or two letters to this or that manager on the quality of data, and yeah, the problems are there. It's normal. People use the data, and there are two like poles. We can imagine that we are in the North Pole because the interaction with the state, with the companies, with partners. Yeah, we see it very well in our portals, and probably you will see the same in your portal. And there is another pole, like fire inspection in the school, sanitary and epidemiological situation in the district. What are the complaints coming to the emergency and rescue service in the district? So, and as soon as you publish this data, you will have not 200,000 users as we are having now. We will have millions of users, and it's very logical to start with the data which are directly connected with the safety and health of the people. Many thanks to the panel members. Thank you for your active participation. Personally, I have understood two things. First, we don't know exactly how the system, internal system used by the state authorities is working. We don't know that, and the way the portal is working very much influences the feedback we get, and well, this is the challenge that we have to settle as the community. So please tell us more on how you work so that we can provide a more detailed, more specific feedback. And the second point is that very often we really take this position either of an attacking party or defending party, but it's the easiest way, but in this way we forget that mistakes actually are not the problem, but the way to improve ourselves. So, and one more point I want to make, let's create efficient communication channels, meet more often. At the next IGF, we will discuss open data portal which have already been established. And meet you next year. Thank you.